On an October afternoon, this is one of the quietest little valleys in Minnesota, a narrow wooded gorge with a cold, clear stream running through it and gold leaves coming down through the pines. It is a small park, barely 200 acres, easy to drive right past. But this hollow holds a rare stand of great white pines that should not really be here, and every spring its floor turns into a blue sea of wildflowers famous across the state. It holds a river full of trout, a landscape that the last ice age forgot, and the story of a country lawyer who gave the whole place away to keep the pines standing. Let us walk down into the valley of the Whitewater and find all of it. Carley State Park lies in Wabasha County, in the far southeastern corner of Minnesota, about 15 miles northeast of Rochester, and only 2 miles south of the small town of Plainview. It is a compact park of about 209 acres, wrapped around the north branch of the Whitewater River, a stream also known here as the North Fork. The land sits roughly 1,000 feet above the sea, folded into a steep valley cut down through wooded ridges. About 6 miles of quiet trails thread the park, dropping from the high rock ridges down to the green floodplain along the water. We are starting up on the valley rim, and we will work our way down toward the river. The first thing to understand about this valley is what did not happen here. For more than 2 million years, great sheets of ice ground back and forth across most of Minnesota, flattening the hills, filling the valleys, and grinding the land smooth. But this southeastern corner of the state was somehow spared. The last glaciers parted and flowed around it, leaving an island of older, unglaciated country in the middle of a scraped continent. Geologists call it the Driftless area, and its steep hills and deep carved valleys look nothing like the smoothed plains around them. Picture the height of the last ice age, 20,000 years ago. Vast lobes of glacier a mile thick pressed down on the land to the north, the west, and the east, but right here a rugged wedge of hill country stood clear of the ice, an unglaciated refuge in a frozen world. Because no glacier ever bulldozed it flat, the land kept its ancient shape, its ridges and ravines carved slowly by nothing but running water. That is why Carley sits in a real valley with real relief, steep and green and complicated. Everywhere else the ice erased the old land, but the Driftless remembered. With no ice to fill and flatten these valleys, the job of shaping the land fell entirely to water. Rain and snowmelt gathered into streams, and the streams went to work on the soft old bedrock, cutting downward year after year for tens of thousands of years. The north branch of the Whitewater is one of those patient streams, and this gorge is the measure of its work. The high ridges we started on, and the valley floor far below, are separated by hundreds of feet that the river carved out grain by grain. A small cold stream, given enough time, can hollow out a whole world. Cut down far enough, and the river reaches something astonishingly old. The bedrock under this park is limestone and dolomite laid down about 450 million years ago, in the Ordovician, when this whole region lay beneath a warm, shallow tropical sea. Countless generations of shells and sea creatures settled on that sea floor and hardened over the ages into pale carbonate stone. When you look at the gray rock ledges in this valley, You are looking at the compressed floor of a vanished ocean, older than dinosaurs, older than almost anything that ever lived on land. The river has simply peeled back the cover to show it to us. Limestone has a peculiar weakness. It dissolves slowly in the faint acid of ordinary rainwater, and over long stretches of time that dissolving reshapes the whole landscape. As the water seeps into cracks in the carbonate rock, it eats them wider, opening seams and voids and hidden passages underground. Geologists call this kind of country karst, and the Driftless is full of it. The valley we are walking into was carved not only by the river on the surface, but by water working secretly through the stone below. Karst country hides a second landscape underneath the visible one. Rainwater sinks into sinkholes and disappears down cracks in the limestone, running through caves and underground channels before it emerges again lower down as cold, clear springs. Along the roads into this valley, you can spot solution voids, dark hollows where the carbonate bedrock has simply dissolved away. Those springs are the reason the stream here runs so cold and so clean even in high summer, fed from deep inside the rock. The land you see is only half the story, because the other half is plumbed through the stone beneath your feet. Now we come down onto the floor of the valley, and the whole feeling of the place changes. Up on the ridges, the forest was dry and open, but down here beside the water, the ground is flat, damp, and rich, a true floodplain built by the river. Every spring, the melt and the rain send the Whitewater over its banks, and the flood lays down a fresh skin of fine silt across this bottomland. That renewed soil is fertile beyond anything on the slopes above. And it is here, on this flat green floor, that Carley performs its most famous trick. For about a single week each spring, usually in early May, the floor of this valley turns blue. Virginia bluebells, a wildflower native only to the far southeastern corner of Minnesota, bloom by the countless thousand across the floodplain and creep up the lower slopes toward the pines. Their flowers open a soft pink and then shift, as they mature, to a clear luminous blue, so that the whole valley floor shimmers between the two colors. People drive here from across the state for those few days to walk through what looks like a sea of blue under the bare spring trees. It is one of the great wildflower displays in all of Minnesota, and it lasts barely long enough to catch. Walking here in October, the bluebells are long gone, but you can read the ground that grows them. This rich, damp floodplain is the perfect nursery for the spring ephemerals, the wildflowers that race to bloom in the brief weeks after the snow melts and before the trees leaf out and steal the light. The bluebells share this floor with a whole company of them, and in a good spring the ground is a tapestry. In autumn, all of that has died back into the soil, waiting. The bare brown floor we cross now is only resting between one blue May and the next. It is worth naming the company the bluebells keep, because it is a rich one. Across this same floodplain, from mid-April into May, bloom white trout lilies and Dutchman's breeches, cutleaf toothwort and false rue anemone, large flowered bellwort, mayapple, and trillium. They are called spring ephemerals for a reason. Each has only a few short weeks of sunlight on the open forest floor before the canopy closes overhead and throws everything back into shade. For that brief window, this valley floor is one of the most flower-rich patches of ground in the state, and then it vanishes for another year. Lift your eyes now from the flowers to the far wall of the valley, and you will see the trees this whole park was created to save. High on the steep, rugged slope opposite the picnic ground stands a grove of white pines, tall dark green spires rising head and shoulders above the bare autumn hardwoods around them. From the trail overlook you can see them clearly across the gap, catching the light. They look like they belong farther north, in the great pine country of Minnesota. And that is exactly the point, because down here they are something rare. The eastern white pine is the giant of the northern forest, a tree that can climb well over 100 feet, and its natural stronghold is the cool lake country far to the north. Here at Carley, in the warm southeastern corner of the state, these native pines are near the very edge of where their kind can grow, a relic stand hanging on far south and west of the great pine forests. They survive because this deep-shaded valley holds a cooler, moister pocket of climate than the farm country all around it. To find towering white pines in this driftless bluffland is genuinely unusual. That rarity is precisely why people fought to protect this small piece of ground. Walk in under the pines and the world goes quiet and soft. The ground is carpeted in fallen needles, the light filters down green and dim, and the air smells of resin instead of dust. These are not young trees. Some of the pines here are old veterans that have held this slope for well over a century, weathering everything the seasons could throw at them. But holding a slope for 100 years in an open valley means eventually the sky itself turns against you. And in the summer of 1957, the sky did. Less than a decade after the park was created to protect them, a savage hailstorm swept up the Whitewater Valley and battered the white pines without mercy. Hail heavy enough to strip needles and shatter crowns tore through the grove, killing some of the great trees outright and scarring many of the survivors for life. It was a hard blow to a park whose entire reason for existing was those pines. Yet the stand endured. Battered, thinned, but alive, the white pines went on standing on their steep slope, and the grove you see across the valley today is the tough remnant that lived through that storm. Come back down to the water, because the stream itself is a treasure. The north branch of the Whitewater runs cold and clear across the valley floor, spanned in places by stepping stones that children and anglers have hopped across for generations. It is fed by those deep limestone springs, so even in the heat of August it stays cool. Cold, clean, well-oxygenated water like this is precious and rare on a farmed prairie, and it makes this modest little stream something special. It is a designated trout stream, and that changes everything that lives in it. The North Branch here holds wild brown trout, and rainbow trout as well, fish that can only survive in water that stays cold and clean year-round. Trout are demanding. Warm the water, silt it up, or foul it, and they simply vanish, which makes a healthy trout stream one of the best signs of a healthy valley. On a quiet day, you can stand on the stepping stones and watch them hold in the current or rise to take an insect off the surface. That these fish thrive here, in a stream running through the middle of intensive farm country, is quietly remarkable. It is one more thing this small park protects. Cross the stream and start up the shaded northern wall of the valley, and the forest changes again. These cool, north-facing slopes never get the full summer sun, so they stay damp and cold, and the plants that grow on them are different from anything on the dry ridges above. On the steepest, rockiest of these slopes, cold air seeps out from between the broken limestone blocks all summer long, keeping the ground unnaturally chilled. It is a strange, refrigerated little world clinging to the side of the valley. And in that cold pocket survive plants left behind by the Ice Age itself. These rare cold spots are called algific talus slopes, and they are one of the most extraordinary habitats in the Driftless. Air chilled deep inside the karst rock drains out through the loose, broken talus, holding the ground near freezing even on a hot day. That cold lets plants from the Ice Age hang on thousands of years after the glaciers left, glacial remnants marooned in tiny pockets of chill. Here that survivor is the Canada yew, a low, dark evergreen of the far north, growing improbably on these southern Minnesota cliffs. Each of these slopes is a living museum of a colder world, a small piece of the last Ice Age still breathing cold air. Set the nature aside for a moment and turn to the people, because this protected valley did not stay wild by accident. Like all of this river country, this was long the homeland of the Dakota people before it was surveyed and sold and plowed. When settlers came in the middle of the 1800s, they cleared the ridges for wheat and corn, and much of the great forest that once cloaked these hills came down. Valleys like this one, too steep and rocky to farm easily, were often the last places where the old trees survived. That is what made this pocket of white pines both rare and worth saving. The man who saved it was a local lawyer named James A. Carley. Born near Orinoco in 1869, he settled in Plainview, just up the road, and built a long career in the law and in public life. He served as the Wabasha County attorney, as mayor of Plainview, and then for decade after decade as the state senator for this district, roughly 36 years in the Minnesota legislature all told. He was still serving when he died in 1952, an old man who had spent his whole life tied to this corner of the state. And he had one particular love, this valley and its improbable pines. Imagine standing where Carley stood, looking down at this narrow valley with its rare grove of great white pines on the far slope. All around, the hills were being cleared and farmed, and a stand like this could easily have gone the way of the rest, cut for timber or simply lost. Carley did not want that. He wanted these particular trees, this particular Blue Spring Valley, kept whole and public forever. A politician who spends his life in the give and take of the legislature, does not often get to save something so simple and so permanent. He decided to give the land itself. In 1948, Senator James Carley and the family of Ernestina Bolt donated this land to the state of Minnesota, expressly to preserve the outstanding grove of native white pines. The next year, in 1949, the state formally established the park and gave it Carley's name. It is a modest park, only about 200 acres, and it draws no crowds most of the year. But that was never the point. The point was that a rare stand of trees in a valley that turns blue every May would be protected in public hands, and because of one man's gift, they still are. To feel the full weight of that gift, you have to know what was happening to the Whitewater Valley all around this little park in those same years. Downstream, the larger Whitewater Valley had been nearly destroyed. Decades of plowing the steep hillsides had let the rich topsoil wash away in every storm, and the eroded soil choked the streams and turned them into engines of flood. It was one of the worst cases of farmland ruin in Minnesota history. The valley Carley loved sat in the middle of a slow-motion disaster. The numbers from the worst years are hard to believe. Down in the valley, the little town of Beaver was flooded again and again as the ruined hills shed their soil, drowned 20 times in a single year in the 1920s, and a punishing 28 times in the year 1938 alone. The floods did not just bring water, they buried the land, dumping sand and silt until 15 feet of sediment had piled up, reaching toward the second-story windows of the houses. Farms were buried, pastures ruined, a whole community driven out. The land itself was dying, washed off the hills one storm at a time. Out of that disaster came one of the great conservation stories of the region. Beginning in the late 1930s, the state and federal governments launched a determined effort to heal the whole Whitewater country. Ruined farms were bought back, and the bare eroded hillsides were replanted, tree by tree, to hold the soil in place at last. Contour plowing, grass waterways, and careful grazing were pioneered on these very farms, some of the first such experiments in the entire country. Slowly, over decades, the bleeding land was stitched back together, and the valley began at last to recover. The healing had a driving force, a state forester named Richard Dorer. Hired in 1938, Dorer threw himself into restoring these eroded valleys, championing the reforestation of the ruined hills and the recovery of the wild land. Under his push, and with the labor of Depression-era work crews planting trees across the scarred slopes, the Whitewater country was slowly clothed in forest again. Today, the vast public forest that surrounds this valley carries Dorer's name in his honor. So Carley's small gift of pines sits inside a much larger story, a whole region that people chose to save rather than lose. All of that saving added up to the living valley we walk through today. Carley is small, but it is full of life. White-tailed deer move through the underbrush, foxes and coyotes hunt the ridges, and beaver work the stream down on the floodplain. Overhead you might hear the deep hammering of a pileated woodpecker or the call of a great horned owl. And in migration season the valley fills with songbirds using this ribbon of forest as a green highway across the farmed land. It is not a grand wilderness. It is something rarer, a healthy scrap of wild country that people deliberately kept. This valley is also a meeting place of two different worlds of forest. Carley sits right on a natural seam, where the rich hardwood forest of the eastern blufflands gives way to the drier oak woods and openings of the southern prairie edge. On the cool, moist slopes grow the northern hardwoods and, improbably, the white pines. On the dry, sunny ridges the trees thin toward oak and open ground more like the prairie country to the west. Walking from the shaded valley floor up to the dry rim, you cross from one kind of forest into another in the space of a single climb. And in late October, that whole layered valley catches fire with color. The oaks on the dry ridges turn deep bronze and russet. The maples and basswoods on the slopes flare orange and gold. And through it all the dark green spires of the white pines stand unchanging, holding their color while everything around them blazes and falls. Down on the floodplain, where the bluebells will return in May, the bare gold leaves drift onto the cold, clear stream and float away toward the Trout water below. For a few short weeks the valley is lit like a lantern under the low autumn sun. It is the same beauty that made one man give it all away. So this is Carley, a small quiet valley that holds far more than its size. A driftless island the Ice Age forgot, cut down to a 400-million-year-old seafloor riddled with springs and cold Ice Age relics. A floodplain that turns blue for 1 week every spring, a grove of great white pines clinging on at the edge of their range, and a cold stream full of trout. All of it kept whole by a country lawyer who simply gave it away, in the middle of a valley that people fought to heal. Thank you for watching. Follow for more of the trails of the world.